Hello, Lisa. Hopefully, you guys had a great weekend. Um, you know, you ever tried to eat a clock? It's very time consuming. And that is your joke of the day. Um, for today, we'll finish John F. Kennedy's presidency, which unfortunately coincides with the end of his life. So, spoiler, we've got that. So, we'll talk about his domestic policy, the new frontier, how it's kind of still, we still see effects of that, and then kind of getting into Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes president after Kennedy. So it's not much in the way of actual notes. The trade-off there is, though, is I have something a little bit longer for you to read for homework tonight about Motown. So hopefully, I think you'll find that interesting. Also, friendly reminder: your paper is due in a week on the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a Lyndon Johnson policy. So we'll talk about that in the upcoming lessons. So hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and talk to you guys later. Bye. Today we'll finish talking about Kennedy's presidency. And coming out of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, Kennedy launches something that he refers to as the New Frontier. And this is an ambitious legislative program that is going to look to address issues of poverty, education, but it also has some really ambitious stuff. It is in the New Frontier that Kennedy talks about expanding the space program and makes, famously at Rice University, he says that it is the goal of the United States that by the end of the decade to not only send a man to the moon, but to return him safely. I guess return him safely is an important part of that story, right? Um, Also coming out of the Cuban Missile Crisis is the beginnings now of talks with the Soviets about arms reductions. And so, what you have in 1963 is a nuclear test ban treaty. The idea that both countries are going to stop above ground testing of new nuclear weapons. Of course, there's ways around this. Now they start testing underwater, that type of stuff. But it's the beginnings of this idea that maybe we need to kind of control um, this arms race. And the Cuban Missile Crisis getting to the brink of an atomic war kind of woke both Khrushchev and Kennedy up to the idea that maybe we need to do something about this. So that is something positive you see coming out of this. The other thing is the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps is an organization that's still around, in which young men and women are sent around the world to educate, work in third world countries, and it's run by the State Department. The thought is this was actually an effective kind of Cold War type of strategy. The idea that you're sending young, idealistic Americans to these far off places, and they're helpful. They're digging wells, creating sanitation systems, teaching education, teaching English, and so the new frontier does have a lot of these legacies. The biggest legacy, though, probably most importantly, is the Apollo program, which culminates with Apollo 11, in which Neil Armstrong, that you see there, is the first man to walk on the moon. So you do have that coming out of this. Unfortunately for President Kennedy, his presidency is cut short. Um, in November of 1963, he is shot and killed on a campaign trip in Dallas, Texas, making Lyndon Johnson the next president of the United States. Kennedy's death shocked the country. It's one of those events in American history that marks time. So the idea is if you have people old enough in your family, of that World War II generation of people, they remember where they were when Pearl Harbor was attacked. If you talk to your grandparents who were alive in the 1960s, they remember where they were when they heard that President Kennedy was killed. It's just something that it's just ingrained and burned into people's memories, how they found out, where they were, and what the country was like immediately afterwards. Um, and the interesting thing with the Kennedy assassination is that Kennedy himself was not a very popular president. Remember, he narrowly won the election of 1960. He was winning people over. But the election in 1964 was going to be a tough election, and he was in Texas for that reason. They're trying to get Texas's support, and for the upcoming election. His vice president, Lyndon Johnson, was from Texas, for this very reason to try to shore up support in the South. Because remember, he's a Democrat, and so the Democratic Party was dominant in the South, but he's also someone who's kind of been pushing for civil rights, if you remember from the last unit. And that is tending to get Democrats to kind of turn away from Kennedy. And so by including Lyndon Johnson in his administration, that was supposed to appease those people. And with Lyndon Johnson becoming the next president of the United States, it will fall to him to try to continue a lot of these ideas, not only the ideas of the new frontier, but also in terms of civil rights, um, and kind of finish a lot of the work that Kennedy unfortunately left undone.